Mike's on.
All right, a little after 2 o'clock, the Brian Billick Report is brought to you by Mavis Discount Tire. Save on tires at MavisTire.com and by the Joseph Abboud flagship store. Experience exceptional quality, style, and service at its very best. Also, SeatGeek, which we'll get to in a little while. Brian, what's going on?
How you doing this afternoon,
Good.
Mike?
All right, everything's good. As we head down the stretch here, what's on your mind this week? What grabs you?
Well, with every week that goes on now, things become more and more identified. I think in the AFC, particularly with the win by the Ravens last night, I think we have the 6 teams we're going to see in the AFC in terms of the wild card in the division. Now, there'll be some moving around, and we might see San Diego, as amazing as that may sound, may catch Kansas City. That'd be the only qualifier. So I think the AFC is just going to be a matter of the order. We look at Baltimore and the games they have left to play. They should win those enough to hold on to that 6th spot. They're not going to catch, obviously, Pittsburgh. And it looks like, obviously, Pittsburgh and New England against the field.
All right. Yeah, no, I would agree. The AFC looks like there's not a lot there. I mean, the Steelers shouldn't be talking about playing the Pats already in the postseason, but it's starting to look like that. You know that?
Yeah, it is. But to look past Cincinnati and Baltimore, you're right. That's something that as a coach, we're famous for, hey, it's all about this week. But them looking ahead to that New England game, and particularly in playing the way they are, which, as we've said many times, up and down, a little schizophrenic, not playing as well against some teams that they should really, to face a Green Bay Packer team and to give up those kind of points after seeing the Baltimore Ravens in Green Bay, shut them out, that doesn't bode well for them right now.
When you watch them, they're funny because we know how much talent they have on offense. And they're improved on defense. They're improved in that secondary. But you watch them play like they did against Green Bay, and you just shake your head and you say, wait a second, this is a team Baltimore shut out last week in Green Bay, and they're eating you alive in this game. I mean, they're just basically doing whatever they want. And you say, how is that team ever going to match up with Tom Brady, who they've never matched up with? It's hard to until we see the Steelers match up with the Pats, it's hard to believe they can.
Yeah, they're a little like that team that has not won a game in the playoffs, and people can say, well, we're playing well, we're not focused on that, but it's a legitimate observation. Show us that you can win a game in the playoffs, and then people quit talking about it. Well, the same thing with the Steelers, as good as they are, and with all the talent they have, quit having those kind of games, or people are going to keep making these kinds of observations.
No question. We're talking with Brian Billick. Now, the NFC is getting interesting. How about how about a guy like Case Keenum? It's almost like I don't want to, go back before the audience, but, a Joe Cap type year or a guy coming out of nowhere. I mean, Earl Morrall was better than that, so I don't want to turn him into that because he actually won MVPs. But here's a guy who not only has reinvented himself, he's actually playing on an all-star level now at quarterback.
Yeah, and in fairness to Case Keenum, and I put myself in front of that line, I think those that made the observation, as I did, well, this is just a guy, because and it was not fair maybe to judge him on that, because what did we see him? We saw him in the playoffs with the Houston Texans team as a rookie. He gets thrust in the playoffs, doesn't play very well, and they get knocked out. He then bounces around, ends up going to a really bad St. Louis and then L.A. Ram team, where he gets, a handful of starts, not supported by a lot around him, and doesn't look very good. Well, now he goes with a very good football team. And there's those that say, well, maybe anybody could do that with the way Minnesota is right now. But I think we got to give Case Keenum more credit than that and recognize that, he might be a legitimate quarterback. I'm with you. Let's don't slam dunk him into the Pro Bowl yet. But certainly the year he's having, he's showing a maturity and the ability to deliver the ball, particularly under some, amazing circumstances. A couple of those throws with people draped over him, diving under a guy, and then delivering the ball. I think it's a legitimate second look at Case Keenum.
I'll be fascinated to watch the Falcons these next 4 days coming Sunday. They'll have the Vikings Sunday at home, and then they have the Saints on Thursday. 4 days. They win those 2 games. They'll be 9-4. They face the toughest schedule left. 4 of the 5 games they have left are against teams that are 8-2, 9-2 or 8-3. So, and they have 2 with the Saints, 1 with Carolina, 1 with Minnesota. They face almost a playoff run here where they are right now, 1 game behind in the division. And it looks like they're finally getting the offense together. Julio Jones with a record-breaking day Sunday against Tampa. They drove the ball late in the game, kept the ball the last 7 minutes, and put the game away. Maybe we're finally seeing the Falcons, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle these next 2 games in 4 days.
Yeah, I think Minnesota is going to be the big one. I think they'll match up with New Orleans very well. I think we saw the New Orleans defense we saw the real New Orleans defense, so to speak, in terms of the Rams and what they're able to do. Good, solid improvement, make no mistake. I like what New Orleans is doing defensively, but they're certainly not an elite, not even a top of the half of the league kind of defense. And with an offense that has its rhythm like Atlanta, you're right. It'll be interesting to see how they're able to hold up. Now, that Minnesota matchup against Atlanta is going to be very, very interesting to see. Of course, Minnesota's good a defense as there is in the league right now. Not giving up big plays to Julio Jones the way we saw earlier, how they're going to match up with that zone that obviously Mike Zimmer's so good at in terms of Minnesota and what they're able to do. I'm going to be very interested in seeing how this game plays out. And you're right, if they can beat Minnesota, or if they can beat Minnesota and then New Orleans in back-to-back in that time frame, then I think they are the team we thought they could be in terms of their personnel, and they may be the force in the NFC.
Your team started a run before the playoffs started and carried it right into the playoffs. Atlanta is really forced to do that now. They're playing 4 games against teams in their 3 in their division. They're playing the Vikings. They're playing 4 games against teams either 9-2 or 8-3. They're forced to play on a very high level. They don't even have a playoff spot locked up yet. They're fighting Seattle and the other team in the South for the wild card. It's going to take 10 to get the wild card minimum in the NFC. They're almost in a playoff push with 5 games to play, which could really be something that could really help them if they are able to accomplish this. They'll go into the playoffs with a real head of fire, and they'll be a very tough team to knock out.
You're absolutely right, Mike, because if they can come through that baptism, so to speak, what do we say about the SEC team sometimes? Well, the fact that they have to play the schedule they do makes them so formidable when they get into the postseason and in the playoffs that they have in college football. It's the same way. They can earn their way in because they're going to play Carolina, they're going to play New Orleans and what we're talking about. And again, we didn't think this when it started out, but we could see 3 teams from the NFC South. Obviously, Seattle is the one that's going to be the wild card. Of course, they're having their own difficulties as well. But it appears that's what they're going. That's going to be where their main competition is coming from, particularly in the NFC. So, yeah, they can earn their way into it. And the good thing is, even if they don't quite get there as the division champ, if they win enough of these games, even as the wild card, they can still feel good about themselves, saying, "Hey, we far away into this. We are battle tested. We're the team to beat."
Talking with Brian Billick about the NFL. You see him on the NFL Network. Brian, Eagles, where they are right now. The Pats know how to throttle down. They're not a team that throttles down a lot late in the season. Belichick doesn't believe in it. That's the old Parcells way. They don't like to take games off. If you are a coach who hasn't had this kind of team, with a quarterback on only his second year, and a lot of players who haven't been through this, do you dare throttle down with that Eagle team, or do you just pedal to the metal the rest of the season?
No, you got it. I don't know that you have to pedal to the metal, but you can't throttle it down, because part of the problem is, and we typically talk about this in the last week or 2 of the season, maybe you secured your playoff position. Nothing's going to change, so it's okay. We're going to rest this guy. We're going to rest that guy. That's all well and good. But with a 53-man roster, then that means you got to push other guys into more of a load. The guys that now are maybe not only going to have to start for you, but also maintain their special teams numbers to where you could leave yourself injury prone, or you could get yourself hurt in a key injury. So I can see Philadelphia, and I can see obviously with Pedersen going, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to just keep fighting our way through it. And then maybe if you get to the last game and you want to set a guy down or so, particularly if you're going to have that bye, and Carson Wentz, you maybe don't want to expose him to it, but I'm with you on that. You got to be very careful before you back a team off.
I agree with that, and especially with a young team that hasn't been through it. Let's talk about one team struggling and 2 teams that have lost confidence in their quarterbacks. Kansas City struggling mightily. They can't run the ball. They got injuries on the offensive line. Their young back has hit a wall. Alex Smith with no running game has been exposed where he had to throw in a wind up here. He couldn't do it. Last week he makes another bad pick. So he's not on his game. They come to play the Jets this week, and the defense for the Jets can play. Plus, they could catch wind and cold here again this week. With Andy Reid, you're not going to dare probably to change quarterbacks. It's a complicated offense. But can he restart that offense? A veteran coach, a good coach, can he restart that offense?
Yeah, you should. But the problem becomes, what was the chatter coming in when they drafted Mahomes? It was, well, when are they going to make that switch? And Alex Smith was already talking about, well, I'm not sure I'm going to come back to Kansas City. Well, you get on a run, you're playing well, they're talking MVP, so all that gets pushed to the side. It's not a distraction. See, it's no big deal. Well, now with the way things are going, now that all gets dredged back up. And now you're going to have people start calling for the young player to come in. Not that he's the answer. So, yeah, they're going to have to battle through a little bit. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't do it. The running game has dried up because people have caught up with the jet sweep stuff with Tariq Hill to a degree. I did a piece on Playbook showing where even against a standard box, people aren't even having to add the extra man into the number count with a standard front or even with a three wide receiver set. They can handle number for number. They don't have to act the extra guy in the box. That way they're able to do more things in the secondary. That to me, they've got to get the running game cranked back up. That's going to open up things down the field for them.
Would you dare put the kid in? The kid's got a big arm. We know that. His father was a guy who threw 95 miles an hour. The kid has a monster arm. He could be in the wind again where he couldn't throw the ball in the wind at MetLife when they played the Giants 2 weeks ago. His ball was floating all over the building. Would you dare put the kid in the game, or is that too much to ask?
No, I think you're throwing up the white flag if you do that. Maybe give a call up to Sean McDermott up in Buffalo and ask him what he thinks he ought to do. Because it didn't turn out real well for him. Boy, you make that move. To me, that would be a desperation move, and I don't know that they're at that point.
I agree with that. Now, the other team, Jacksonville's got everything going except Bortles, and he threw away another game at Arizona last week. The head coach, Marone, messed up his clock management at the end of the game. He should have run the ball on second down. It cost him a punt he didn't have to make, and it cost him the game. But also, they were in commanding position when Bortles threw a terrible pick. Saw him do that to the Jets. He lost the Jet game that day by throwing a terrible pick there. Bortles has not lived up to the rest of that team's play this year. They got a big pass rush. They got a running game. They have everything except the quarterback clicking. What do you think about them trying to play around their quarterback?
Not good. At the end of the day, I'm going to do a piece on that this week on my Playbook segment. And I'll use the analogy here. In high school, I was a basketball player. I wasn't very good. Couldn't shoot. Played good defense, rebound. And my coach said, look, you know what we need from you offensively? Make your layups. That's all you got to do. Is just make the layups. And Bortles can't make the layups, and that's a problem. As good as they're playing, and they are solid, if he doesn't get to the point where he can at least make some of the layups, then this is going to be a problem for them. As good as they are, and they're pretty good, but they fall into that group with, they're behind Pittsburgh and New England. They're with the rest of y'alls.
Yeah, that's not a pass you should throw an interception on, the pass he gives up for a touch.
And there's another one I'm showing. He's just normal boot and waggle, has a crossing.
You can't be throwing them on those. You can't throw interceptions on those plays. You can't.
No, like I said, just make the layups.
How about Dallas right now, where the players seem to be mutinying? I mean, the head coach comes out and supports the coach because he loves him personally, and the players kill the coach. No adjustments. He's not disciplined enough. So, as an old adage, it's never the player's fault. But boy, the players throwing Jason Garrett under the bus.
Yeah, this is right in that category of jumping up on the podium, going, "I confess he did it," and this is not good. Obviously, their inability to move the ball. We've been saying, okay, they can't run the ball without Ezekiel Elliott, so it's going to fall on Dak Prescott. Well, they can't throw the ball. They can't keep up in a track meet. They're single-digit in terms of their scoring. They've got to be able to run the ball better. Now, they can. We've seen them. It's not like Morris is totally ineffective. And, again, I'm going to do a piece on it showing that and the teams they got coming up in the next 3 weeks, they can run on. The problem is there are also teams that can put some points on the board. If it turns into a track meet, if Dak Prescott has to convert on third down, they have to throw the ball 35 times. Yeah, we've seen this movie. They got to get out there and just pound away, use that offensive line, and hopefully suck down the clock with that, because we've seen the other.
the league, the world, the NFL community, let me put it that way, has fallen in love with the Chargers. Everybody's on the Charger bandwagon. They're the hottest team. They're this, they're that. They got the Browns this week, which gets them to 6-6. Are you buying the Chargers, or are you not on the bandwagon or on the bandwagon?
Sure, I think San Diego has shown that they can be among that group of the rest of y'all's. I don't think they're in the Pittsburgh and New England level, but they can play as well as some of the playoff teams we're going to see. Like I said, I think Baltimore's going to be a playoff team. At the end of the day, I'm not sure how good they really are. That offense is really, really struggling. The defense is really good when they play someone where they can stuff the run, because then they get turnovers. They've shown some teams that can run the ball pretty good. That leaves them vulnerable. Then there's big plays down the field. And then obviously Tennessee, we just talked about Jacksonville. So yeah, does San Diego deserve to be amongst that group? Absolutely.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of good individual players. They have that team has a lot of talent. They have they have a good running back. They have good wide receivers. Rivers can play. Bosa's a tremendous pass rusher. They have some real individual talent on that team.
Yeah, and the key is Phillip Rivers. He can be special, and as long as they don't put him in a position where he has to press. We see that with he and a Drew Brees, where sometimes, hey, this isn't holding up. We're not running the ball. Defense isn't doing well. Okay, I got to put the ball down in some places. I probably shouldn't, but I got to try to make something happen. He and Drew Brees, when they don't get in that position, defense is playing well. They're getting pretty good running game. That's why we're seeing so much more efficiency and lack of those types of games from Drew Brees. Both these guys can be lethal. When you look at it, the Bengals are not terrible, and they got the Steelers Monday night. That could get them to 6-6 if they can pull off the upset there. They're not a terrible team. The only thing is, some days they don't protect their quarterback, and when they don't, he seems to throw terrible interceptions. But they do have talent, that team. It'll be interesting to see whether the Bengals can win that game. Yeah, if there's one team that I look at that can break the current lineup as we're seeing it into the playoffs, it would be the Bengals, because they have a way to play themselves into it. They're going to play Pittsburgh. They're going to play Baltimore. It's a tough task. Will they do it? I don't know that I'm going to bet on it, but you could make a case that if they end up being that surprise team, much like we're talking about San Diego, it's not going to be a total shock, and you're going to say, "Yeah, I could see how this happened."
Yeah, that team's not bad. They really aren't. You just don't know about Dalton. There's games he just doesn't show up. Plus there's games where he gets sacked 10 times. I mean, they just have some weird days on that offensive line.
Well, I keep saying the same thing, but they're like so many of these others. If they get the running game cranked up like they did last week,
yep,
then all of a sudden now it changes the dynamic a little bit. He becomes a different quarterback. And you could say that about a lot of people, but for them it really does change the numbers and gives them a chance to be competitive. Again, throw them into that group. Can any of these teams be that team that get hot? Well, we saw Baltimore do it in 2012, kind of mediocre during the season. Then Joe Flacco gets on a run, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. Could you be that team possibly in the playoffs? Sure. But they're going to have to do that if they think they're going to supplant both Pittsburgh and New England.
There's two teams that I think you got to watch that could maybe, and I don't think Pittsburgh can beat New England twice to get to the Super Bowl. I just don't think they can, and I think they'd have to. I think there's two teams in the NFC that I think could match up. Minnesota, if their quarterback has a good day, the rest of the team is there. And the other is Atlanta. If they continue on this wild run, they clearly have the firepower to play with them. So those are the teams I'd be watching now in the NFC. Minnesota, and can Case Keenum continue this magic? The rest of the team is clearly good. And remember, they lost Dalvin Cook also. And also Atlanta, which, it'll be very interesting to see what they do here against Minnesota this weekend.
Yeah, I would put Philadelphia and the Rams in that category with the caveat.
I just wonder if they're too young.
Exactly right. And you're going to go, okay, so it's if you're going to make a comparison Philadelphia to New England, I can make a lot of favorable comparisons. But if you're going to say Tom Brady versus a second-year Jared Goff and a second-year Carson Wentz, then you kind of go, hold on there, not so fast. So that's where the hesitation is. Certainly these guys have not shown that they're going to wilt under that pressure, but until they get to that, until we see them in a championship game, until you see them in a Super Bowl head-to-head with a Tom Brady and the pedigree of the New England Patriots, then there's going to be that, I don't know if I'm going to bet the farm on this one until I see these young guys do it.
Is Seattle a title contender in your mind, or are they now a cut below that?
83% of their offense is Russell Wilson. That's all they got going. And with that secondary depleted the way it is, hard to imagine. Still obviously sound. They've got the pedigree. Russell Wilson's something special. But at the end of the day, we've seen teams fill the rush lanes, keep him in the pocket at all costs. At all costs. Not that he can't beat you from the pocket, but he's going to do a lot less damage there. And then against that secondary, against some teams, sure, but against, a Matt Ryan, against a Ben Roethlisberger, against a Tom Brady, against now a Jared Goff or Carson Wentz, against the really good quarterbacks and the offenses that have got it going, that secondary being beat up the way it is, as good as that pedigree is, I'm not sure Seattle can, as you say, play their way through 2 or 3, 4 games versus teams that have the legitimate quarterbacks.
Thanks. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Brian.
Sounds good.
All right. SeatGeek buying tickets can be